Throughout the NBA's history, drafts have a certain habit of belonging to the player at the top. These can be good, like the 1985 Ewing draft or the 2003 LeBron draft, or they can be bad, like the 2001 Kwame Brown draft or the 2013 Anthony Bennett draft. But sometimes the draft doesn't really belong to anyone, at least not in the moment. And by the looks of it so far, 2024 seems to be one of those years. There's no Zion, there's no Cade, there's no Wembanyama, and by all accounts, the 2024 NBA draft projects to be one of the most nameless and faceless cycles the league has seen in years, as this is considered to be one of the weakest classes in recent memory. But don't take my word for it, just read the writing on the wall. At this point, 15 out of 30 first-round picks in this year's draft have been dealt with varying levels of protection, and it seems like NBA teams are avoiding 2024 draft selections like the cheese touch. But still, as with every draft, there's going to be at least one guy that pops, and the task for front offices as we enter the peak of draft season, albeit harder this year than most, is to identify that player. So let's take a look at some of the key names in the 2024 NBA draft and see if we can determine who it'll be. In addition to this being a weak class, another part of the reason that this draft seems to be lacking typical hype is because the prospects have been playing all over the place. If you take a look at ESPN's latest mock draft, you'll notice that their top 6 picks come from 5 different leagues. So not only is the talent in this draft hard to identify, but it's also flat out hard to find. Whether it was the G League or the Australian NBL, a lot of the better prospects in this year's class are coming from outside of college basketball. And at the current moment, it wouldn't surprise me to see at least half of the lottery picks come from outside the NCAA. Leading the international group this year is Alex Sarr. Sarr comes to the draft by way of the Perth Wildcats in the NBL, and before that, he actually spent a year playing in the Overtime Elite League. Sarr is an incredibly mobile 7'1" big man and is seen by many as a top prospect in this draft. His primary draw comes on the defensive end, where he's able to switch onto pretty much any player and stay in front of them with ease thanks to his deft lateral movement and impactful length. And in Perth this year, he was able to fully display his defensive chops, as the Wildcats almost welcomed him to switch in ball screen actions. Sarr averaged 1.5 blocks per game and showcased tremendous feel as a rim protector, so it's easy to see him becoming a starter based on those traits alone, but he also flashed some really interesting offensive skills as well, as he's surprisingly coordinated and fluid when he's given the rare opportunity to handle the ball. Obviously, Sarr can also thrive as a rim runner and lob finisher, but I would like to see him get to the basket more frequently, as he has an odd tendency to float on the perimeter a bit too much, and while that can come in handy in certain situations, he only hit 29% of his threes this year, and the outside shot looks a little stiff. But still, the defensive impact and the offensive flashes give him a case to be the first overall pick in 2024. When it comes to Zaccharie Risacher, he's the type of big fluid wing that teams tend to look for at the top of the draft. Spending this past season with JL Borg of the French League, Risacher averaged around 10 points per game while shooting 46% from the field and 40% from 3, and he emerged as a legitimate spot-up threat that can space the floor at 6'10", while also showing a nice ability to cut off the ball and get downhill using his long strides. Risacher also perhaps represents the best bet for teams if you're looking for a self-creating shot maker, as while he isn't particularly efficient when it comes to creating his own offense yet, he has the general fluidity and confidence needed to regularly create separation for pull-up jumpers, which of course is extremely valuable. Defensively, Risacher is somewhat of a work in progress, as he needs to fill into his frame a bit more and he doesn't have the most fluid lateral movement, but overall, in a draft with little true star power, he makes for an interesting upside play. Nikola Topic is another international name to monitor, as the 6'6" point guard has been perhaps the most impactful player of the non-NCAA prospects. While a knee injury has sidelined him for most of 2024, Topic shined for KK Megabasket in his 16 games for the club this season, as he averaged 18.4 points, 6.5 assists, 4 rebounds, and a steal per game in Adriatic League competition. The main attraction for Topic is the pick-and-roll creation. With the NBA having largely become a pick-and-roll centric league, Topic's skill set fits in perfectly from a schematic perspective. As a driver in these scenarios, he's excellent at identifying lanes to the basket and accelerating to the rim, where he finishes at a great 68% clip, and he has great change of speed and processing skills that allow him to create advantages over opponents. In addition to his scoring, he can also shine as a passer, as he posted a remarkable 2.21 assist-to-turnover ratio with Mega, showcasing his decision-making and composure that will translate to the NBA. G League Ignite also has its fair share of prospects in its last year of operation, as both Modest Buzelis and Ron Holland should hear their names called pretty early in the 2024 draft. Buzelis is a 6'10 playmaking wing who showed flashes of on-ball creation and versatility that NBA teams covet, as he averaged around 13 points a game. And Holland is a sturdy 6'8 wing who projects as one of the class's better defenders, and actually led Ignite in scoring this year at 18 points per game. Going back to Europe, there's also 6'9 forward Tidjane Salaün, who spent this past season with Cholet in France and showed flashes of potentially becoming a 3-level scorer, in addition to being a floor-spacing wing with size. As while he only hit 33% of his threes this year, he has a very clean stroke and has shown solid comfort when it comes to firing off of movement. In college basketball, while the overall talent was considered below average from an NBA draft perspective, there are still guys worth monitoring when it comes to evaluating this class. To no one's surprise, Kentucky has two very good guard prospects in Rob Dillingham and Reed Sheppard, who might actually be the top two collegiate players in this draft. Dillingham is an electrifying 6'1 guard who came off the bench for the Wildcats, yet still averaged 15 points and 4 assists per game, and despite his size, he displayed a real knack for dictating tempo offensively. Dillingham is lightning quick with the ball and loves to run the floor in transition, but where he really showed growth in his game was in the half court, as he was a very good pick and roll creator who just always seemed to hit massive shots at an efficient rate. His 47% field goal percentage and 43% three-point mark is astounding given the difficulty of his shot selection, and if paired with the right personnel around him defensively, you can definitely mitigate his admittedly below average chops on that end. While it's still unclear whether he enters the draft or not, Reed Sheppard also came off the bench for Kentucky. That might be part of the reason why a certain someone is at Arkansas now, and he emerged as one of the most impactful two-way guards in the country, as he averaged 12.5 points and 4.5 assists per game, while shooting an unfathomable 52% from 3 on over 4 attempts per contest. Sheppard's ability to always make the right play on the ball while also showcasing his usefulness off of it makes him one of the more polished offensive prospects in the class. He's great at running the offense and pick and roll, as he can score effectively out of it while also making the right passing reads more often than not, and because of his highly efficient shooting, he's an incredibly viable threat as a spot-up shooter and driver off of closeouts as well. Defensively, Sheppard also provides real value, as he's one of the smartest off-ball defenders in the class and has quick hands and reflexes that allow him to never be out of a play. He also has an uncanny ability to block three-point shots too, which at 6'3" is no small feat, especially considering he blocked 23 shots on the year while only getting his shot blocked 11 times. Not to be outdone, two-time national champ Yukon also has a pair of prospects likely to hear their name called in the lottery in Donovan Clingan and Stephon Castle. Clingan is an elite big man prospect who at 7'2" anchored Yukon's defense this past season, as he swatted over 2 shots per game and showed his strength as a post defender as well. While his offensive game is secondary to his defensive impact, Clingan still shows a solid ability to grab offensive rebounds and finish on putbacks, in addition to using his size effectively as a rim rusher and roller towards the basket. He's also an underrated passer, as he posted 1.5 assists per game and an assist-to-turnover ratio of 2, and he showcased a real understanding of Dan Hurley's complex NBA-style offense that should be put to use at the next level. Stephon Castle, on the other hand, is a well-built 6'6 wing who improved greatly as the season went on. While he's coming into his own offensively, he still managed to start in 30 games this year and play 27 minutes a night, thanks to his high-intensity defense, which was on full display during Yukon's NCAA tournament run, where he totally shut down guys like Boo Buie, TJ Shannon, and Braden Smith en route to the national title. Castle's ability to stick to opposing ball handlers provides immediate point-of-attack value in the NBA, but what makes him even more promising is that his frame allows him to potentially guard up as well, and it's easy to see him taking on some of the best players in the league once he gets there. The key thing with Castle will be his shooting and overall offensive craft. He's a great athlete who's a solid rim finisher and driver, but he only knocked down 26.7% of his threes this year, and teams actually played off of him at some points during the NCAA tournament. And while he did make some teams pay from distance, like Alabama in the Final Four, it still raises concerns as to just how effective he can be in the modern NBA with a below-average jumper. Still, the athleticism, high-energy defense, and ability to fill a variety of roles makes him a top prospect in this class. Outside of those four, there's also Colorado wing Cody Williams, who at 6'9" has burgeoning ball skills and defensive range that could turn him into a high-end two-way player, as he averaged around 12 points a game and shot 42% from 3. There's also Duke freshman guard Jared McCain, who might be more well-known for his TikToks than his basketball, but is still one of the draft's best shooters and smartest players, as he scored 14 points a game in addition to grabbing 5 boards while hitting 41% of his triples on an Elite 8 team. Baylor freshman Jacoby Walter is another high-volume movement shooter with athletic pop. Isaiah Collier was at one point the #1 recruit in the country and showed flashes of breakthrough talent despite being hamstrung by injuries in a bad USC team. Baylor big man Yves Missi catapulted his way into the first round, and Miami's Keyshawn George is an interesting upside bet as a 6'7" guard. And of course, don't forget about the upperclassmen, as there's a bunch of them that should be considered first-round prospects. Dalton Knecht basically carried Tennessee's offense this past season as a 6'6", 3-level scorer, averaged a little under 22 points per game this year. Marquette point guard Tyler Kolek is the type of high IQ distributor that will likely find his way onto an NBA roster. And Colorado forward Tristan da Silva provides real offensive versatility with little holes in his game. All of this is simply to illustrate the obvious. The 2024 NBA draft is wide open, and while personally I'd probably have my highest ranked player in this class slotted at around 8th or 9th in the 2023 class, the thing about me is that I tend to be wrong. A lot. I mean, you're looking at a guy who had New Mexico in his Final Four this year. Still though, predicting who will be the breakout star in the 2024 draft feels nearly impossible. But remember, there's always someone. Even the 2000 draft, seen as potentially the worst class of all time, saw Kenyon Martin, Jamal McGlure, and Michael Redd earn all-star bids at one point. So 2024 won't be totally barren. But who will emerge as the gem of this year's draft? Well, your guess is as good as mine. Thanks so much for watching, and give me your thoughts below.